Attention Nashville, Tennessee area drivers. Commodore Express is actively hiring CDLA team truck drivers for our West Coast operations. This is an in and out and back type operation. 4,500 plus miles per week. We offer full benefits package and above average pay package and an achievable bonus for more than 4 turns per month. We're a family-oriented company that takes pride in our values, honesty, respect, and integrity. We can work with full-time, part-time, retired, or casual drivers. Visit our website at www.commodoreexpress.net to learn more about us and request an online application. Or call Robert in recruiting for more information at 615-287-5140 extension 1. That's 615-287-5140 extension 1. We look forward to seeing you in one of our seats.
Have you lost your job? Have you lost a loved one? Are you exhausted caring for your parents, for your kids? Well, you can find immediate relief when you read Sheila Mack's new #1 bestseller, Bootstraps and Bra Straps. It contains the Boots formula to move from rock bottom back into action in any situation, especially right now. If life has knocked you down, pick yourself up with Bootstraps and Bra Straps. Get your copy at www.SheilaMack.
Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's Sheila.
Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mack, and today we have special guest, Mark Villareal. Mark is the author of 8 published books, with his most recent release, A Script for Aspiring Women Leaders, 5 Keys to Success. Jack Canfield recommended the book to his TV audience with Villareal's guest appearance on Hollywood Live. Villareal spent 35 years in corporate America, with 21 years at the C-level reporting to the CEO or president. His passion is leadership and soft skills, in addition to helping individuals develop for long-term success. He is a 3-time international best-selling author, with his first book, Shortcuts Get You Lost, a leadership fable on the dangers of the blind, leading the blind, the first to achieve the status, followed by leadership lessons from mom, and the Millennial Factor, 10 steps in managing millennials to success. Mark also wrote Mission, Vision, and Values Resource Toolkit and Leadership Crisis Management, understanding the 3 stages of crisis management, as workbooks to assist businesses to manage and build the proper culture for success. He has also authored a children's series titled The Adventures of Park Ranger Brock, Cliffhangers, and his junior park rangers, as he has a passion to encourage youth to dream big. All right, welcome to the show, Mark.
Well, thank you for having me. I apologize that my book titles are so long.
That's great. Yeah. That sounds incredible. And so I'd like to start off this show. This show actually came about with my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula.
I've read it. Yep.
From rock bottom back into action in any situation. And so I'd like to ask, nobody could predict this pandemic and this crazy situation. I actually wrote this book right before the pandemic happened. It took me about a year. And so I don't know. I'd like to start off with maybe what results have you had, and what experiences have you had where you've gone through a tough situation and gotten back on track?
Well, I think that each of us could probably think of so many. When the crisis hit, I wrote actually about crisis management, understanding the 3 stages, I thought, well, maybe it can assist some of those because no one predicted COVID. But I'm going to go back several years to where I was 20 years old, because it might tell you a little bit about me and my journey. I tell the story when I was 20, I was promoted, fast food management to a location that I was 20, but the location was a retirement town where the average age of the people were 35 years and up. Maybe it wasn't the best situation for someone who was 20, but I accepted, and I struggled, and I was terminated. And, it was heartbreaking, as a termination is, but I discovered the book, The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. And I love it even today. I read it every year. It's a 45-minute read anyway, but it made me realize, first of all, that I was a manager and hadn't developed into a leader yet. I realized, look, I was put in a position, I had no development plan, and, I had no assessment of my skills and how important that was. And it really taught me that that was the bridge from a manager to become a leader. And I said, I am going to put this in action from this day forward. And since then, I've had success. So my next place of employment, I won Manager of the Year and all these awards, and and it's brought me up until this day. And I love about catching people doing something right, and about how it teaches about building a culture. And that's really my passion, is in leadership. And my LinkedIn, says that I realized that the more I focus on other people's success, mine came naturally. And that's what helped build the foundation in me in learning. That and my mother, as I wrote about in my book, Leadership Lessons from Mom. She was, I will quote that she was the best housewife, the best leadership coach who chose to be a housewife. She just had the natural ability because character was big to her, which is the foundation of leadership.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, that's something. That is a lot that you've done. And I love where you reference your mom in this book that you're talking about, because there's something to that. Sometimes we think as moms. Now, I raised 6 children. I adopted three from birth. They all showed up when they were very young, the ones that were adopted, 3 and under. So really, they're family. And it was difficult because I was running 5 businesses, 5 gift stores at the time.
Right.
And my ex-husband didn't work because I made too much money. So I had to continue working, which was really interesting. But I had to figure out how to be the manager and leader of my home. And that was the hardest job. It required planning, scheduling. I mean, I scheduled 5 businesses with all these 200 employees. I mean, we did really well. We had big, like 5,000 square foot stores each. And so it was a lot of work, but that home management, it made all the difference. And so if you're listening in and you're a mom, this sounds like an incredible book to get. Could you tell us the name of the book again and where it's available?
Well, it's titled Leadership Lessons from Mom, and it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, all the book places. And I tell the story from childhood all the way until her death, until she passed away. But and you'll see, it's funny because you'll read stories and realize, well, I did that with my children, and so you realize the impact that you have. And I will tell you that even as a mother, if you think your child's not listening at the time, that you're planting seeds, and they will thank you for it later. It's very important.
Oh, I love that. That's so true. And I actually devoted a whole chapter to parenting, and then to parenting our parents. So one is parenting where you get to the point in life where you graduate as a mom, as a parent, mom or dad, really, and you graduate. And if you did your job right, you kind of get fired from caregiver. And it's like, wait a minute. And there's this whole identity crisis that kind of shows up. Sure. And at the same time, these young adult kids are pushing back because they want their freedom and expression. And the mom, usually it's the mom, but mom or dad is chasing after them like, wait, no, you got to stay close. And, here's the apron strings. And so it is really a tough transition. And then there's that other time I actually took care of my grandparents and then my parents. So I had elder care when I was very young with young children, and I was caring for parents that were in different hospitals for different reasons, and grandparents, one with dementia, all these different things at once. And so that elder care, there was this whole thing of, now I have to be my parents' parent, and that change. So what was that like for you, those two periods of your life, since your mom passed away at a certain point, that transition of elder care, and then also for parenting when you left home?
Well, a few things. So, my mom passed away in 2005, and my dad, longed to be with her. And, he died in 2007. And I tell the story in my book, and that's the title of that is God's Timing is Perfect, because my dad longed to be with my mother, and he moved to the small town in Granger, Texas, where she was buried, and just started devoting his life to taking care of the graveyard, working with the church, going to see other people. And my dad was a retired military man he was a drill instructor before I was born. So he was the toughest man I ever knew. And those last 2 years, he just changed. But when he came down, first with prostate cancer, had surgery, they discovered pancreatic cancer. It was my wife and I who took care of him. My wife's a retired nurse. What a blessing, but we took care of him, and even he wouldn't take his pain medicine until the day he passed away. The doctors were saying he'd be in so much pain. So experiencing that actually even taught me more lessons, and it was an honor and a privilege to take care of my father. And when he passed, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. So, and my book explains that I had earned my dad's trust, that he had told my brothers and sisters, Mark is in charge of everything. He has it. He's who I trust. And I appreciate that I had earned his respect and trust. And I tell a story of when that transpired in the book, Leadership Lessons from My Mom, because my mom pushed me to confront my father, because she could see that we were in business together, and in the business, he was intimidating me on decisions that he didn't agree with. And she said, the minute you allow yourself to walk on eggshells, there'll be eggs at every turn. So you need to confront your father, or you need to leave the business. And that's how good leaders do. They recognize that those are leading when they need something. So even though I had left home in my mid-20s, I was working with my parents. We had a couple markets. My dad had retired from his business, bought a market in Redlands, California, and it just bloomed. We opened the second market. He had that golden touch. He was a man of an 8th grade education, but he was successful with what he did. My mom just continued to teach, even when I left home and when I could go home and visit. She would even repeat some of the lessons, but update them to what was occurring at the time. So one time she had asked me, I would drop off 2 of my boys at one time and then go do what I wanted to do. And my mom loved the grandkids, but she said, you need to spend the day with your children. And she taught me, you need to do something that matters today and each day. And so when I would come see her, I moved away to Texas, and when I would come visit, she said, how are you treating your employees? Do you ask yourself at the end of each day if you did something that matters? She would just remember her teachings. And so that's the power that she had. And I'm a mama's boy. I tell people when I work with companies or I do workshops, I repeat myself a lot. And if I have to mention my mom a lot, I'm letting you know beforehand, because I'm a mama's boy, but I appreciate everything that she taught me.
That's incredible. I loved the point of how you had to confront your dad at a certain point. And those are the difficult conversations that we have to have with our children, with our parents, and with employees many times, or a boss if you're working in a company. And something's not right. Those conversations are so important, and they're difficult to have. What helped you through having that conversation with your dad? How did that come about? Did you plan ahead, or did you it just came out?
Well, I gave it some thought, but one of my mom's saying, she had so many of them, but she would always tell me that confrontations is a benefit. And I teach that in leadership today, that great leaders confront issues. They don't let them sit on their plate. And my mom said, that doesn't mean you're going to go start an argument. It just means that you learn to confront things. And it doesn't mean that your first confrontations will go smoothly, but you will get better each time. And so I did think about it. I told my dad I needed to come over and speak to him. I came over and we went out in the backyard on the grass, and naturally I just told him, look, this has to change or I need to leave. And his first instinct was to intimidate. It was natural. You know, it becomes natural, whether they realize it or not. And I stood my ground, and he got really quiet. And then he pulled me towards him and he hugged me.
Nice.
And he said, this is the moment I've been waiting for.
Wow.
And that's what I tell, that's where our relationship was never the same. It was better. It was, like I said, I had earned his trust, and and to see that up until the day he died, it was there, and I appreciated it. So,
that's magical. That is something that happens when there's that transition. First, you're a young adult, and you're still earning your parents' respect, really.
Yes.
And getting used to that. And you're pushing back still. There's that pushback of, this, I own my life and I know what I'm doing. And I'm 25 or 22 or whatever. And then, they watch you fall a few times, and, then you're like, okay, I'm humbled a little bit. Maybe you were right. There's that point where it shifts and you have a friendship. It's like an adult. There's still, you respect and honor your parents.
Yes.
But there's a different, like, you can talk about things, and you talk you talk as a man to man for you and your dad, or woman to woman with a adult daughter and mom or grandparent or whatever. So I think that's the shift, that it's such a magical, beautiful relationship to finally have. So I had relatives were sick, and there was lots of different things that happened for me. So I ended up in foster care, in and out of the home. I bought my mother her first house. I helped all my parents until they passed away, and grandparents. And I had this, there was a lot of pushback with the grandparents, obviously, and they couldn't care for me, but there was a lot of anger and pushback. And then we became best friends. I mean, like best friends. And I came home to take care of Grandpa, and until he passed away, and took care of my grandmother. And there was something about that shift where that moment where you have that respect, and it's an adult to an adult relationship. And for me, it was Grandma would come home to my house, and she would want everything like clean, like white glove inspection. Like, think of your dad in military. It was like, and I have a new baby, and I have other kids, and I'm running the business, and the husband doesn't want to clean or work or do anything. And I'm like, okay. And it would just be awful and stressful. And I'd be cleaning for hours, and it would, take away from what really mattered. The top of the windowsill does not really matter when you have a newborn. And so then it was like, oh, I can switch this. She doesn't come over to my house. I'm going to beat her to the past, and I'm going to her house with a handful of groceries. I'm bringing her gifts. I'm bringing her what she needs. And all of a sudden, it was like, oh, I'm helping her, and she's not afraid. A lot of times there's a fear with parents or grandparents like that. I was the only child, only grandchild, only everything. There's a fear of losing that connection and love. And so they kind of smother a little bit. That was the clean smother. And it was out of love, but out of, control. And then she never bothered she didn't care. And her house was not white glove clean. So the standard was not the same. And so there was that moment, and it was like, okay. And then she'd just have me help her with everything. And she felt safe. And that goes for relationships, with their husband or wife or partner, or whatever nowadays. Safe. When you have a relationship of any kind, the people need to feel safe. So you felt safe with your parents. And when you're an employer for a team, there's an ability to feel safe at work, to know
Absolutely.
that. And that safety feeling is what really matters so much. If you don't feel safe in a relationship, friendship, intimate, whatever, parent, adult, if there's not safety, the relationship is broken.
Absolutely. As you were describing it, and before you even mentioned, and even at work, I'm thinking of what I call first team environments. And I preach that in my workshops, that how to build a first team environment within your culture, because it's very important, because the absence of trust is because the absence of allowing people to be vulnerable. To have a policy that it's okay if your opinion's different. I want to hear your feedback professionally. There's a way that we do that. When we ask, or, no gossip, no talking about others. That's called a first team environment. My dad and I had that. We the conversations that we had after that, he would come to me for advice, and he wouldn't do that probably because of pride. And he felt that he would lose his grip on, I have control. Intimidation is about being in control. And so I relate to that in business. There's a book called 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. So I don't reinvent the wheel. I talk about what helped me be successful. So the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is about building a first team environment, how you set the rules. And in fact, when I work with businesses, large or small, I always talk about communication and how you set expectations, and when you set them are very important. You set them early, you set them at the beginning, and you set them constantly.
Yes. Oh, that's so important. I just had this conversation last night, actually, with a good friend, and we were discussing how we teach people how to treat us. And especially if you're running a business and you have a team or group of employees that work for you or with you, however you want to call it, there's this fine line between leadership and friendship. And sometimes if the line gets too blurred, you lose the respect. You know what I'm talking about? And
yes.
And they think and so then they can just call out all the time, and it's okay. It's just the respect is gone.
Right.
So what do you suggest for keeping the level of respect yet showing the care?
Well, people love leaders who are genuine. So the first thing that I'm a big mission, vision, and values person. That's why I wrote the workbook. And even in the book that I just wrote, it talks a lot about mission and vision and values as well, with the women in leadership. But values, my mom used to say, values are what you live by, principles are what you stand on. Meaning, you can say values of integrity, trust. I have all these, but if they're not automatic, they haven't become a principle. And that's what, in other words, what you stand on. So it's important that I express my values early. Humility is the first one. And the value in humility, another quote from my mom, humility is a strength, not a weakness. It allows you to correct yourself. It allows you to understand that you learn from others. It allows you to keep an open mind. And so I would say at first is always setting expectations by not only speaking to your values, but showing them in action that they're principles. I am very open to where I communicate about who I am. When I would take over a business, I would get to early, stay late, talk about baseball, talk about people's kids, because I wanted them to see that I was genuine. And the more genuine that you are, people know that you have to make difficult decisions. When I've had to lay off people, it hurt, but people knew that it's my responsibility to make the best decisions for the business and every employee that we employ. And so as long as I kept demonstrating that, and if I crossed the line, I admitted it. I spoke to it. I confronted it. There's that confrontation as a business. And I said, you know what? I think this has crossed the line. I apologize. If I disrespected someone, I may say, Sheila, I just disrespected you. I apologize. That's one of my values. I will not do that again moving forward. And my actions have to show it, that I earn that trust. Trust is the big factor. And that comes also from 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, that you have to earn it daily and realize that you do earn it. It's not, my dad used to say, it's because I have the stripes, that's the old military mentality. And I'm like, nowadays, you have to earn the trust, but you have to keep it each day, because they say trust is like a bank account that you can make all kinds of deposits, but one withdrawal can waste it all away. Right. And there's some values like ethics that if you cross that line, it's hard to ever earn it back.
Yes, that makes sense. And I look back at, I ran my gift stores for 17 years. I rented the first one and then I bought the others cash with the money from the stores. So then I owned all these properties and I ended up with all these kids. And it was a time in my life where I finally said, it's time to shut the stores down and rent the buildings out to other companies and not work all these hours every day. Sure. And be with my children. And so when I did that transition, it was like a 8-month plan. And I helped every single employee ensure that they were going to have a job somewhere else and transition really smoothly. And so that was something I did because I had that foresight. I knew what I was planning to do, and I was really open about it, and nobody was angry. Some of them got higher paying jobs. My job didn't pay that much at the store. I had 2 nannies that helped with childcare. So I had lots of moms that had their little ones and needed flex time and childcare, but they were top salespeople and they would come from Nordstrom's or back in the day, the Broadway Macy's, and they would rather work for me for less and have that option of having their kids nearby when they had to provide for their kids. And so it worked because I needed the nannies for my kids. So it was just perfect. But we're still friends today. And let's see, I think the last store that closed was 2002, I think it was, by the time we closed down that last one. And then I just rented out the buildings. And passive cash flow is really nice. So what is the exit strategy that you have for businesses today? When people decide it's time to transition, what do you suggest they do?
Well, first of all, not to think about their exit strategy and when it's finally at the end. So it's to when they action plan each year, to think about, if I were to exit, what would that look like? Mm-hmm. So, I'm real big. I worked with the Cesar Chavez Foundation up there. So that's a $5 billion organization. Oh. And even with them, they have like 6 different businesses. And so it's the exit strategy may be one of the businesses, that type of thing. So with strategic planning, it's always, what are we doing? What are our 3 initiatives for next year? You should never have more than 3. Yeah. But if I were to exit, what would that look like? What would it take? And then what responsibilities do I have? Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes if you wait to the latter times, and many still do, it's a little difficult. Mm-hmm. 2, I think it's reason to ask that because you want to establish the culture like you just described. I tell a story that in 1997, I was in the 90s, I was what was called a turnaround specialist. So I had the gift and the ability that they would send me to a location that needed a turnaround, and I would be able to do that. And the only bad thing about that is you would turn one around, they send you to the next one. But the one location in San Antonio, Texas, was $500,000 in debt. People not taking phone calls from customers because they're complaining, vendors not being able to get a hold of accounting because they want to know when they're going to get paid, I was brought in there by the owner to help turn it around. One of the first things we did was establish the culture that if you give us 110%, we'll do everything to advance your career within our organization or even outside our organization. Right. And as we turn that location around, 4 of our people that started this as what we call entry level were hired by the corporation that was an international corporation to be regional managers. And then my operations manager was hired by the corporation to be the director of training and development internationally. Wow. And usually some businesses are like, don't hire my people. We welcomed it. Because we wanted to live that culture, and we had a pipeline of people who wanted to work for us. Exactly. And I think of a gentleman named Rick who wanted his own roofing company, but it's like, Rick, give me 110%. And even sometimes when he would win a contest, it'd be, hey, I paid for you to take this class that's going to help you in your roofing business, those type of things. And he owns, all these people I still know today. So as you said, right. Yes, but also is important is treat everyone with respect. My mom would always say everyone's a 10. She was big on the Olympics, which means that even if people can't succeed in your organization and then you have to let them go, doesn't mean that they're not a 10.
Yeah.
So, and if you treat everyone with respect, they became the people who would send us employee referrals because they would say, hey, it's a great company. I didn't succeed there, but I think you would. Or ironically, they went on to companies that they had influence on who they did business with. And so it was to our benefit because they said, hey, yeah, I did work there. I didn't succeed, but it's a great company and their service is very good in what they do. And so that's where the impact came in. And that business, real quick, I told Jack Canfield this story. It was at that business that we rebuilt by single mothers. So this is one of my passions on why I women in leadership and, a big thing for single mothers as well. But I hired one who had that I cannot fail attitude. What can I take home with me to read, to learn? And she would refer the next one that eventually I had 9 single mothers on the sales staff. And, it wasn't by design. It just happened. But within 2 years, that location was part of a franchise organization. It won the most outstanding location of all 260 worldwide. Yep. And in 3 years, that owner sold for $12 million. And he's still a good friend today. So.
Yes. That makes all the difference. It really does. And you can go to bed at night. When you work in integrity, you can sleep well and not worry about it. And that's something that, even as a parent, how I worked with my employees, I'm modeling that for my children. It's not me telling them to go read a book about it. It's living it.
Right.
And it just makes all the difference where even when they were very young, there's some of them are still in college, but when they were very young and they got their first jobs, all of a sudden they'd be helping to lock up and helping to work managing the other employees, even though they were younger, because they grew up in that environment. And they had that, okay, I care about this business. Sure. It's not just a job to get some money, spending money at that point. It's something, it's about how I show up is my signature. It represents me and who I am. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, it's who am I being. And so that's really important and something that's the best way to teach your kids. Did you bring your children in or did your parents bring you into their business? I guess you worked with your dad.
Right. Well, even when he was in the business that he sold, I used to go in on the weekends and sweep it and do everything. So I was always with my father and on the weekends. And, I'm the youngest of 7, so I was my mama's baby. So, special relationship. But they would bring me in the business. I would see how they interact. My dad was a disciplined man. I still get up. My wife gets mad at me because I don't set an alarm and I'm up at 6 a.m. Just that mentality. She's like, can't you sleep in? And I'm like, I can't, So, but yes, I did. It's funny because I was in information technology. So my oldest, Mark Jr., lives in Los Angeles. He was actually, when he was struggling in high school, I brought him in to take some of our courses in information technology, and he excelled. By the time he was 19, he was a full Microsoft certified system engineer.
Wow.
So ironically, he does that today, has, like 35 certifications out there. My other boys, one works for Microsoft. The other one does programming for a phone company. So they had that mindset. But also, it's one of the models I have and I teach, but it's also in my children's books, is that great leaders pay it forward. And my mom was big on that. And she would always tell me, I want you to always seek mentors, no matter what level you always seek mentors, but also remember to always then seek those you can mentor. And she would even explain, you will be amazed how much more you learn by mentoring others than those that you learn from your mentor. So that was big to her.
So true. It's something with that saying, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And the other end of that, and when the teacher's ready, the student will appear.
Absolutely.
I learned so much from my classes and my students. And actually, I started my gift store when I was 23.
Wow.
So I hired people in their 50s. And they were like, honey, I don't know how I'm working for you and you're my boss. And I was like, well, you're going to lead this place. I hired talent. And so I learned from them, and yet they were my employees or my students. Boy, let me tell you,
Absolutely.
First grade class, that is the toughest audience you ever had in your life.
Yep.
They will let you know in 1 second what you did wrong, what's right. And don't hold back. They don't care. And so there's something to that that's really important. And think about bringing our kids in, moms, dads listening in. It's so important to not give everything. And I know that you're giving. Sometimes we give our children so much out of love, and it hurts them. And as a teacher, when I was teaching, my kids got to go to these great schools free as long as I taught there, and I was there with them all day, and I loved it. And so I did Montessori teaching, and it was great. And I did it so I could be close to my children, and I loved working with kids. But I learned that some of the parents did the homework for the kids. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, your dad works at JPL, and he just made a rocket or some kind of little
sure. Yeah.
Fly. But you did not do that in second grade. Your dad did the project. So how does that serve the child just learning how to earn your own income, learning by going to work and seeing what mom and dad does, whether you have your own business or you work for yourself and now you're working at home and you're homeschooling because the schools are closed again or whatever. It's not a bad thing to share that with your children. It's so important. It makes a difference.
I agree 100%. And sometimes you have to do it really out of love. So I tell the story about the youngest, Nikki, and he was the handful. You always say you have one. He was the handful when he was a teenager. For whatever reason would get in trouble. And, I tell stories about trust with him because he'd say, why are you mad at me? I've been good, most of the month. And I would say, oh, well, when you get married, tell your wife that you've been faithful most of the year.
Right.
That type of stuff. I mean, trust is something that's earned. But we talk about planting seeds because he tells me today he graduated University of Texas, top in his class for neurology. Where that came from, I don't know.
Wow.
Just turned it. I was just turned it on like a switch. But he will call me or text me and says, "Thank you for being so big on character. You think I wasn't listening, and I thank you today." And he complains about what I used to complain about to him. So that's the important message. But I remember one time he was doing something. He was looking at brand new cars. And I'm like, what are you looking at brand new cars for? And he's like, well, you and mom are selling, we had a rental property, are selling the rental property. So I'm
oh no.
And, I don't know where that came from that you think you're good. And I had a used Chevy S10. And I actually had him buy it from me. It was the lesson my dad taught me. I said, gave him a bill of sale and everything. It wasn't a lot, but it's like the lesson of you buy it from me. And he did. And I can see how even that taught him responsibility, because the actions from it. And so sometimes you just have to realize, you want to give your kids everything, right? You do. But I want to give it to them out of love that they learn. And that, they're ready for setbacks in life. That's all part of the learning as well on how to overcome it. They're ready for the challenges. And it's because of that. It's the same way that we learn that you do certain things like that.
That's so true. And it's something that when you get a lot of pushback with the teens and young adults, many times it's because you're over giving. The underlying message is, no, I don't trust you can do that on your own.
Right.
You can't stand on your own 2 feet. So I'm going to help you, to the point where there's resentment, and and you're like, well, why is this person being resentful? This child that I just gave everything to, resentful. That's what it is. Like, over giving will cause an attitude faster and it sounds, doesn't make any sense, but it does when it happens every time.
Well, not to overquote my mom, but the way she would tell me how I was going to be raised is the exact speech I give when I set expectations on any new hire or take over a team, where she says you will be managed by rewards or consequences.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for it to always be rewards, but consequences will happen. And how you accept those consequences and change your behavior can quickly get you back on the reward side,
Nice.
or keep you on the consequence side. And it's almost identical to what I tell new employees. We manage by rewards or consequences, and I would love to keep it on the reward side. But when the consequences occur, how quickly you modify your behavior and accept the coaching will quickly get you back on the reward side. So.
That's so important. What advice would you have? You worked with some single moms and helped them a lot. And so what advice would you give to single moms or dads, single parents that are dealing with working and raising kids and everything that comes with that all at once?
Well, I mean, the biggest advice, and my book that I wrote is designed for women, but I could have write the same book for men as well.
Mm-hmm.
And chapter 3 is titled Prepare for Battle.
Yeah.
and really it talks about that building a support network. And so with every women that I've mentored, when we go through, the first 2 things we do in the chapters about building their own mission statement, and defining their own personal values. That's called define what you will live by. What will you live by that will guide your decisions? And then start talking about your personal goals. Chapter 2 is define what you will live for. What are your professional goals? And that takes even some assessments of your skills and traits. That's all provided in the book. And we even created a free workbook that you could download, that 52 pages of assessments and all that to help and assist. But the prepare for battle is because you're like, I'm ready for it. I'm going to go attack after the first 2 items. I've never seen someone not have a setback. And sometimes that comes closest to home, especially with mentoring women. That's where the doubters, the naysayers, the spouse or the family member says, oh, you're taking time away from your family and you're doing that. And that's why a support network for others that have been there. And there's an anonymous quote, and you may know who said it, but especially for women, is behind every successful woman are successful women who have her back. Nice. And so I really teach that in the chapter about how to look for support networks and how to assess them, and then how to visit them and then utilize them in your action planning on what you did on your skills development, all the assessments that we do throughout it, that you could build your plan for success. Because then chapter 4 is to go out and implement it. And then chapter 5 is how do you keep the momentum going, writing the momentum. How do you keep it continual? So.
Yes, that is important. I had a lot of help. I had my grandparents' friends were neighbors. I moved into the old area where I kind of grew up part of the time. And so there were all these older ladies that were grandparents that we adopted. So
right.
My children had this safe group of grandmas watching over them, like 5 in particular. And
right.
Then the nannies that I hired to help with the store were actually ladies I had met that were retired Sunday school teachers. And and so they'd worked with children and know everybody in the community and had so much wisdom. And they had their own homes. So one of them had a $3 million home back then. And she says, I just want $10 an hour and I'm bored. I want to be with your kids and these other children because I can't stay at home alone anymore. And I was like, sold. Okay, here,
Right.
And it was that knowing people that I could trust, finding people I could trust and doing fair trades or working with them one way or the other. I mean, that lady that I mentioned, she had every meal at our house, every holiday with us. She was really an extended grandma until she passed away. And so that's something that you have to be kind of creative when you start out, but you can contribute back. So I would have kids come to my house and some of them I would be tutoring and then they would all play. But my goal was when I am home, I want the children at my house. I prefer the kids playing at my house than going to other people's houses, maybe not supervised, whatever. And so there was always that. And then I'd know which parent, okay, they're going to actually supervise the play.
Right.
So there was a lot that went into that so that, when you go to work, your children are safe. And even for my employees, it was one of the biggest things I said was, if you don't want to be here and you need to be with your family or something else, you need to just go do that. I don't want somebody at the store trying to sell things when they're somewhere else.
Right.
They're not present. They will lose sales. They will turn clients off. And so there's something to, when you're creating flex time that's reasonable with your employees, when you're honoring their human experience and needs, they're going to show up every sale day. Everybody was there, dedicated. They, 17-hour day, whatever it was, dedicated to it when we had our big parties and this and that, mixers. And so that was something that it was a give and take, and it makes a difference. So it's not hopeless, but it's kind of scary. I think if somebody just became a single mom, or for whatever reason, they're parenting alone, a dad maybe, that it's kind of scary. How do you set it all up? How do you start? But once you get started with one and then the next, just make sure they're really trustworthy people.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why the evaluation process is important, and that's why we put it in there. It's not just, hey, I found one,
Yeah.
And that it's like you test them, and then they too have to earn your trust, and as you work through it. But there are some great ones there, and I even tell people today, look, if you're looking for others, and especially with virtual now online, if they're not even in your city,
mm-hmm.
ask me, and I can refer you to several.
Yes.
And if you look to on who endorsed my book, Women's Prosperity Network, Amazing Women Nation, several of the others, there's just great resources there. And it was nice for them to look at and say, man, I wish I had this when I started, but they're there to support now, and they're great networks, and there's so many others.
Yes. And, there's also, I share about this there. It's not a paid thing, but I do share about 211, and that's in every state in the United States and province in Canada. If you Google 211 in your state or province, if you have a real need for some extra support, that's housing, food, getting real help for maybe somebody has addiction, abuse, getting out of an abusive situation, something helping your kids, mental health help, 211 is a great place to start for those things, and also to refer to other people listening. It's just a resource that nobody knows exists, or, everybody asks, have you heard of this 211? Nope. And it's so important, because that could change somebody's life. So if you have a place at work, if it's your business, or you can ask permission to post about 211, we don't know what's going on at home with our employees. Sometimes they're going to come in and put on a happy face and do their job. And we don't know, is there something going on at home where they need help and they're afraid to ask for help when they need it? And just seeing that information is like, oh, wow, I can get out of this abusive situation, or I can get my older kid that's on drugs, I can get help for this addiction, or whatever it is, it's there. And I think it's just really important to share that, because people don't want to talk about it at work sometimes.
Well, that's a great recommendation, to remind, because even when you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, 211, it's not out there as prevalent. And especially in work environments, the more that you create a culture, one, we talked about first team vulnerability, but even in, a couple of my books, in the Millennial book, I explain about the more that you create, we would have a community involvement team that we would create, that different people throughout the organization would talk, how are we going to contribute in the community? We would have one that says, or what are the things we do socially, whether it's, our holiday events, or are we going to play baseball, those type of things. We even had that committee. But the more that we created that environment, the more open people become, and then they could recognize even when someone's struggling. Sometimes they may not say it, but you see it. And that's why, emotional intelligence is so big nowadays. It's always been there, but it's so prevalent because of the different workforce groups now, and a lot more diversity in the workforce, that teaching leadership, emotional intelligence, because EQ, which are the 5 components, they say IQ is set in stone, EQ can be developed even further.
Yes.
So that's important.
Wow, that is. And so for working with millennials, it's a different world. And I think sometimes they get these bad raps for being millennials. And it's like the world is different. And now I don't know the time frame for millennials. I think my kids are all millennials, maybe most of them.
Yeah, and sometimes different people use different time frames. You know, it's like 83 to this year, or some says 1980 to this year. You know, and, yeah, so they can be different time frames.
Okay, yeah. See, I remember my children, my youngest two, started school literally on September 11th. 9/11 September 11th.
Okay, yeah.
And it's a different world that I'm like, what are you talking about? And then we had all these different situations and school violence and things that you and I, when we went to school, we were kind of like at peace. Maybe somebody said something that wasn't nice. Right. That was like the extent. They didn't bring guns, and all this crazy stuff. And we didn't have whatever was going on. And so they were brought into this world at a time where things are changing, and you can't predict, am I going to work for this company for the next 30, 40 years? The companies are changing overnight.
Absolutely. Well, in my first book, Shortcuts Get You Lost, that title that was my mom's lesson from me walking home from school. And I walked home from school 2 miles back in Lakewood, California. Mm-hmm. It was a safer environment back then. All the kids were walking in the same direction, but I took a shortcut and got lost. And so that I tell that story because I correlate it to business as well. Shortcuts get you lost. You have to backtrack. But that tells you how different the world is to how it is with millennials. And that really, we have to understand how that dynamic really affects it. So there's a lot of myths about millennial, but there are some truths. But I think some of it comes from that a big influx of millennials are going to be 70% of the workforce that people see a big change. Mm-hmm. And I quickly explained that the top 10 things for millennials are the same top 10 things for me, who's a baby boomer, but the order is different. So to me, it was about, stability, how much you're going to pay me. To where a millennial is, what's your reason for existence? That's why I want to know your mission statement. What are the values that your organizations are going to live by? So I want to understand. So I believe that I match that environment, and how much you get paid, and the stability may be 9 and 10. And speaking with my millennial, he said, you're absolutely right. And the reason for that is that we're being told that Social Security won't be around when we retire. That's hounded into this constantly. And so I want to make sure that I'm working in a good environment. Right. But we teach how to create an environment with millennials. Now, the fact that they say millennials are entitled and those type, I teach how you eliminate. There are certain people in all age groups that feel entitlement. Right. And so I teach how you eliminate that from day one by how you set expectations. You show them the career lattice of the different skills sets for every position. And you say, I expect self-accountability from you. If you are interested in any of these, you can always come ask me what skills you need to learn. But if you take self-accountability on your own development, and then I have an opportunity to invest in someone, you'll make that choice easy. If I have an opportunity for someone to be promoted, you'll make that choice easy. And that works in all age groups with all cultures, but it eliminates anything about entitlement because you addressed it early and fast.
That's the most important thing. I love that. Yep. So that's incredible, Mark. We are actually coming to the end of our talking time.
It goes fast.
You have so much to say and so much wisdom. I really appreciate having you on the show. I'd love for you to again share where people can connect and learn more about all you're doing.
Well, I mean, my website is markvillareal.com. I have a YouTube channel that is out there where I do free videos and teachings. I call them tidbits and other types of things as well. Or connect to me on LinkedIn. I might be maxed out on LinkedIn, but you could follow me instead of connecting. But you'll find my email and my phone number on my website, because I'll give free 30-minute free consultations, or you can email me for advice. Like I said, I believe in paying it forward, and it pays it back easily.
Yes. Well, thank you again for being a guest.
Thank you for having me.
Not one size fits all. Just like a pair of boots or bra. So the formula is designed to help you through any situation. To grab a copy of my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. It is now available on Audible as well as on Amazon and Kindle and at www.sheilamac.com.